Welcome to Flourish-Meant, the podcast on living life as you were meant to, so you can flourish. Welcome, everyone. Today I have with me Cynthia L Simmons. She is the mother of 5 grown children, the past president of Christian Authors Guild. She's a radio host, a writing and media coach, and columnist for Leading Hearts magazine. She writes both fiction and nonfiction. She loves history, and she ministers to women of all ages, but she has a special place in her heart for young mothers and homeschool mothers, which is why she's here to share with us today insights to flourish in homeschooling. Welcome, Cynthia.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it, Tina.
I am so excited to have you with us today. Tell the audience what makes you so passionate about reaching out to young homeschooling moms.
Well, for one thing, I did it myself for many, many years. You know, with all my kids, I did it probably 25 plus years. And so I understand the issues, I understand where they are, and I know how hard these women work, and I really want to help them be successful.
So what are some tips for those who are out there that may be considering homeschooling, but they're just not sure they can manage it?
Well, it's very doable, even though you think that you can't. And I even had a friend who was dyslexic in high school and elementary school, and she taught her 3 kids successfully. So it is very doable. And sometimes even the struggle to get there, both of you working together to get there, is a very positive thing. So yeah, it's doable. It's hard work, but it is doable. And I think it's worth it.
What are some of the benefits of homeschooling your children as compared to public school or private school?
Well, for one thing, you're spending time with your kids and you're learning together, and it's a bonding experience and it's healthy. You know, my kids learn to love learning, and they love to enjoy what we were doing, and they're all scholars now. So it really does have a lot of benefits. Now, in addition to teaching academics, I also taught them to clean house and to paint and to wallpaper, because it had to be done and they were there. And so we would make a team and we would move furniture, and I'd have one taping and one rolling and one doing trim. And so they learned typical things that are part of daily living, and they don't teach that in schools.
So would you say that homeschooling is easy?
Oh no, it's hard. But you use your children as resources to help you do what needs to happen, and teaching them how to cook and being involved with them as you cook and being involved with them as you clean, being involved in their teaching. You become a role model, and hopefully, as you are a good person, it's a very good role model, and it's better than some of the kids that they would role model themselves after in the school system. So it's a very doable situation. I mean, God intended families to be families, you know, and it's a good way to be a very healthy family.
So what would you say are the 3 main challenges that you faced, and how did you overcome them?
Well, part of it, especially with my oldest children, was learning the material, because, you know, in school you really learn how to learn and you don't really learn it. And so if it comes out of your mouth, you have it. And so I got my education as a homeschool mother, really, unfortunately. So part of that was part of the problem. And the other part was just keeping track of everything. And that's why I learned to depend on the kids to help me and to work alongside them, which I think is healthy because we developed good relationships. If there came to be a problem, I had to say something and teach them to communicate when there was a problem. And it was a very good experience for all of us.
So you used overcoming challenges as a mom, as a educator, really, as you were an educator, a homeschool educator, and as an individual to teach your children how to overcome challenges as well. Yes. By modeling how to go through that process. So you're teaching them things that they wouldn't learn in public school or private school.
Well, my youngest child was disabled, and so a large part of those years that I taught him was figuring out what was going on in his mind and finding a way around it. And as a family, we encouraged him when every little thing that he did right, we were praising him because they understood. They took their turn trying to see if they could teach him, and they saw how hard it was. And so we became an encouragement choir for him, which was healthy for him and for them because they learned to understand where he stood.
I love that so much. For any child, becoming a family that is an encouragement choir for your child is a really exciting idea. I love that so much. So talk to that mom who's struggling with some details like finding curriculum, for example. How do you overcome that challenge of discovering what's the best curriculum for your child?
Going to a curriculum fair and looking to see what's out there is a really good idea because there's everything. These days, when I started, there was nothing. I mean, when I started, there was nothing out there because the movement had just started and people were looking at me like, can you do that? Is that legal? Nowadays, there's everything out there, and even stuff for different types of learners. So, for instance, you can buy the books, just like you are in the school system. You can buy the books and go through the books, or you can do a unit study where you study one particular thing that year, and the next unit you study something in particular. Usually the unit studies cover probably more deeply whatever topic you're covering, and they'll cross historical lines and cross science and that sort of thing. So you cover it more deeply, and a lot of times it's usually more hands-on as well. You'll even do field trips and that sort of thing. And I kind of did a combination. I used the books to kind of give me a guideline so I didn't have to create everything. And then we would do experiments in the kitchen, or if we were studying something that there were movies about, we would go watch a movie or whatever. And we did a lot of trips when we were on vacation. We would do a lot of historical buildings and stuff like that. So I did a huge combination because kids learn differently, because some kids need to see it, some kids need to hear it, some kids need to touch it. I did all of those depending on the child. For instance, one time we had a map experience that my husband led that one, and we took the kids, we handed them a map of a battlefield that was close to us, that was a local area. And we took them there and showed them how to use the map to get around the area that they had lots of riding trails, and we rode the trails and taught them how to use the map. And, that's something, really hands-on that they could get. And it was wonderful. And we discovered which ones were visual learners and which ones were auditory and which ones were overwhelmed by the whole thing. So that was really a good experience.
So your kids responded well to this because you integrated science, math, and immersive experiences for them in the educational material.
When we were studying volcanoes, we would watch movies on them, and then I would go in the kitchen and we built volcanoes out of Play-Doh, and then we would have them explode with vinegar and baking soda, and we'd make pictures of it, and the kids loved that. They'd make pictures. I want to make a red one, I want to make a green one, I want to make a yellow one. So we made all the pictures, and, they really remember it when they do that.
That's a good point. Those kinds of experiences are the things that we remember more than we remember a worksheet.
Yeah.
So that's interesting. You can do an integrative experience, a cross-disciplinary experience. What are some other things that are important to know about your flexibility as a homeschooler and how to overcome the challenge of structuring and making sure you get it all in?
Well, the one thing I learned is that when you're one-on-one with children, or a lot smaller parent-to-child ratio than you would have in a classroom, you can accomplish a whole lot more in a lot shorter time. I didn't care where they did their schoolwork. They could do it outside. They could do it under a tree. They could do it. In fact, a lot of times they would do it around the dining room table with the cockatiels walking past them. I didn't care as long as it got done and it was done well and it was legible. There was a lot of flexibility. I tried to be reasonable with them, and as long as they learned, that's what I wanted them to do.
Did you ever have any challenges with discipline in such a less structured environment?
Kids are going to be kids wherever you have them, and we would all be amazed at the things that they would do. Usually they did it when I wasn't in the room, but for the most part, they were well behaved. You know, your boys are going to be boys and they're going to wrestle on the floor and that sort of thing. And I grow orchids, and I came into the room one time and found that one of the orchids that was blooming was in the floor and the blooms had been broken off. You know, so, but boys are going to be boys. And sometimes when they got that way, I knew they had to run off energy. I'd send them out in the yard and have them run for a while till they, you know, calmed down and then put them back to work. So, you know, it wasn't anything huge.
Okay, so you didn't have any major discipline issues with
No.
homeschooling and trying to get them to follow a structure. Were you always homeschooling, or did you transition from public school to homeschool?
We always homeschooled all the way through high school. One thing that we did do as we needed to, we rewarded. We would say, here's the goal, achieve the goal, and you get a reward. And that's, you know, have the carrot out there, whatever your child is. And that may need to be redone depending on the age of the child and as the child changes. So instead of, you know, being down on them, I tried to praise them to excellence and always have something that they could strive for.
Did you do a different grading system than they would have experienced in public or private school, or was it the same?
I did grade, but I didn't grade as much as people do in the school system because I wanted them to master it. And so that's a little different mindset than saying you got an 80, you got a 60, or whatever. I wanted to make sure that I saw any patterns where they didn't understand something. Sometimes my daughter would understand the math, but when she did the math, she would miss something small, you know, in the process. And that's a little different thing than not understanding the concepts. So, you know, I was going for mastery and they got it. You know, all my kids have degrees, and most of them have advanced degrees. Now, my disabled son is doing fantastic. He has a part-time job where he works 4 days a week. So, you know, they all learned amazingly well and are amazing kids. So it worked.
So what would you say to some of the people who are concerned about socialization?
Socialization is much more normal in a family, and that's kind of what God intended when he developed the family. In fact, there's that verse in the Old Testament that talks about moms and dads teaching their children as they walk, as they lie, as they sit, as they stand. So I think that's why homeschooling to me seemed a more natural situation, because God wants us to teach as we live. And that's what I was doing all the time. When something arose, I would say, you know, I'd pull out a scripture and say, here's the truth, look at it. I remember there was one time that I asked the boys, we're going to have a group meeting for our church here in the living room, and it's cold, we'd like to have a fire. I don't care who gets the wood, but I'd like one of you to do that. And I saw a couple of kids in the kitchen arguing, and I just brought up Philippians 2 about, you know, being other-centered. I said, which one of you is going to do that? I don't really want to know. I'm going to leave the room. And we had a fire in the fireplace.
So you had 5 children, you had plenty of children to interact with other children. Do you see other homeschoolers finding ways for their children in smaller families to interact with other children outside the home?
Absolutely. There's all kinds of groups of homeschoolers that get together and do things. They get together and play ball. They go on field trips and stuff. So there's plenty of that.
Okay. So what about transitioning to college? That's another concern that sometimes public and private schools present with regard to homeschooling. How did you manage to make that transition to college? Did you take the same aptitude tests? Were you preparing for those in advance as a homeschool family?
My kids took the aptitude test and got into college because they blew the aptitude tests away, and they went right into college and did fantastic. It really was, there was no transition issue at all.
Did you have a charting system to keep track of making sure that they were going to be on track for those aptitude tests?
We tested every year. So we knew what their abilities were, and we knew where they stood with compared to other kids. And we obviously worked on their weaknesses. Like I had a daughter who wasn't fantastic at math. She understood it, but she would make little mistakes along the way. So we knew about that, and we were constantly working on that. Now, the interesting thing is that not that she does stuff with math, but she became up into the bookkeeping industry where she's handling numbers all the time. And not that she's doing mathematical problems necessarily, but she's doing bookkeeping because she's very, very detailed. So, you know, she made it.
Mm-hmm. So you were able to customize your education plan to deal with any challenges that your children were facing, and they may not have received that kind of attention and customization otherwise.
Yes, because we understood how they thought, we understood how they learned the best, and we managed to get them educated. For instance, my youngest child, he had disabilities in practically every area, visual, auditory, that sort of thing. And I banged around in his head until we got him where he needed to go. And now he sits in church when they have a fill in the blank. He fills in every blank. And bless his heart, it's so hard for him to write. He can write, but it's hard. But he feels like he absolutely has to do it. And he comes home and shows us every week that he filled out the sermon notes.
So what are some other tips that you want to make sure that those who are homeschooling understand about the process of homeschooling and how to do it well so their kids can flourish?
Well, that's what one of the reasons I'm doing this conference is because so many things have been canceled this year with the coronavirus, and now we've got rioting, and people are fearful of getting out, and even if they can get out, sometimes they're afraid they'll get something, and now we're fearful for our safety. And so I want to offer as much as possible to encourage people that you can do this, and there's help out there, and here's some people that can help you.
So tell us about the conference. It's the Savvy Homeschoolers Conference?
Yes, it's Savvy Homeschoolers. You can find it at savvyhomeschooler.heysummit.com.
Okay, tell us a little bit more details about this wonderful resource that you're offering for people who are just starting and for people who are already homeschooling, correct?
Yes, I have one lady that's going to be talking about different learning styles for personalities, and even not only about the learning style, but how to set up that child's schoolwork so that they will be the most effective. She's also going to teach a class on communication for older children that are in their teens so that they can learn to communicate well, and that's going to carry out into jobs later on. I also have a lady who is going to be teaching how to write and the critical thinking that's involved. She says it's not just a matter of putting words on paper. She says it's a matter of doing a lot of critical thinking along the way, and she's really very good. Then I'm going to be teaching on the how and why of teaching history, why to teach history and how to do it so that kids understand it. And then you're going to be teaching a class on mental health and teaching your child self-esteem methods.
So you have 12, is that correct? 12 speakers?
I have 12 speakers. I think I have 17 classes.
And how long does the early bird price, you said $19.99 is the early bird price. Yes. How long does that last?
I don't know because I can't remember. I need to go look.
Okay, so if you are watching this and the early bird window happens to be over, what is the regular price for the conference?
$25.99.
Okay, so it's still very affordable for all these amazing resources that you're going to be offering. How long will people be able to access this great content?
Until November the 1st.
So you can use all of these tips and rewatch all of these sessions to help guide you through the fall of your homeschooling curriculum.
Yes.
That's marvelous. And I know, Cynthia, that you have a heart for guiding homeschool moms and young moms in general. What are some other resources that you might have to continue to support them, and where can they find those?
My website is clsimmons.com. It was named after my dad, who was CL. He didn't have a first name. And so my website is clsimmons.com. And I have curriculum. I have some history curriculum. I also have, one of them is about how to handle money. And I also have a calendar that comes out every month. And every day of the week, you have something to read, a verse to read that you can meditate on, and then a challenge for the day that you do that day. I have some jewelry that my disabled son and I make together. And I have my radio stuff on my website so that anything you are interested in, any topic you can look up. I've covered all kinds of teaching topics, parenting topics, marriage topics. There's tons of stuff there.
That sounds amazing. I'm so grateful for you coming on today, Cynthia. Do you have any last and parting advice or wisdom that you would like to give those out there that are either in the midst of homeschooling and struggling with it, or they are considering it and they just don't know if they can make it?
Yeah, I think one of the things that I struggled with the most was stress. I had so much going on and I didn't give myself enough breaks at times. And I wasn't even aware sometimes that I was under stress. So I teach people to breathe, to take a deep breath, relax all over. And as they let that breath out, to breathe that out, all of that stress, breathe it out in a prayer to the Father, because this is not just a physical battle, it's also a spiritual battle. And I think being connected to the Lord is a huge part of it.
That's wonderful advice. I'm so grateful for you coming on here today. I hope that all of you will get connected with Cynthia. Follow up on her radio show, Heart of the Matter Radio. Follow up on all of the resources she provides for homeschoolers, including her fantastic curriculum. And make sure that you sign up if you are at all interested in homeschooling. This is a very affordable way to get all the training that you need, to get those resources under your belt and have them available to you for months. So you can have this fantastic set of curriculum for the curriculum provider. You'll be an educator so that you'll have all this to help you along the way. So savvyhomeschooler.heysummit, is that the web address?
savvyhomeschooler.heysummit.com. Mm-hmm.
Okay, and then check her out at clsimmons.com. Thank you, Cynthia, and thank you for listening. I hope all of you come back for the next episode of Flourish-Meant.